I didn't know how I got here. One moment I was a nervous, hopeful intern clutching my worn briefcase. The next I was pinned against the cold glass wall of Adrien Kael's penthouse office. The city lights a dizzying million-carat backdrop to my terror. His hand, iron-strong and infinitely gentle, cupped the back of my neck. "You thought you could leave me?" His voice was a low, dangerous rumble too close to my ear. It promised retribution, ownership, and a perverse kind of sanctuary all at once. The smell of his expensive cologne and the scent of the blood I knew was running down my own temple mixed in the charged air. I just wanted to go home," I choked out, the lie tasting like ash. Home was the one place I couldn't be safe anymore, not with the memory of all of them: Victor's elegant cruelty, Kieran's silver-tongued manipulations, Theo's quiet, watching malice, etched into my soul. He pressed his thumb against a nerve in my neck, sending a dizzying wave of surrender through me. "Home is here, Elias. And you are mine." Outside the office, I knew the others were waiting, the dangerous ones, the elegant ones, the jealous ones. They were circling, snarling. But the truth, the sickening, thrilling truth, was that the one I should fear the most wasn't waiting outside. He was holding me, his cold desire a palpable weight, trapping me in a golden cage of his own making. I looked at the shattered table, the ruined contract, the evidence of his destructive jealousy, and felt a single devastating emotion bloom in my chest. I was completely and utterly owned. Chapter 1. The intern everyone noticed. My palms were sweating, slick against the leather of the briefcase my mother had bought me. It was too nice, too formal, a symbol of a corporate life I was utterly unprepared for. Stepping into the Vernoss Corporation lobby felt like walking onto a runway under 1,000 spotlights. The marble floor blindingly polished, the air thick with the scent of money and ambition. I was Elias Voss, a 20-year-old academically brilliant and hopelessly naive finance intern. I was a lamb in a den of wolves and I didn't even know I was bleeding. I fumbled with my visitor badge at the security turnstile. That's when I felt the change in the atmosphere. It wasn't just the ambient noise of a busy morning, it was the abrupt, collective shift of attention. I walked toward the main elevator bank, trying to look smaller, less noticeable. It didn't work. The stairs were a physical weight on my shoulders. I could feel the cold, assessing gaze of a woman in HR, the speculative, hungry look from a passing executive, and the open hostility from another young man, my competition perhaps. They didn't see an intern. They saw something new, something fresh, something they could consume. I finally managed to slip into an empty elevator car. I pressed the button for the 18th floor, my designated cubicle farm, and exhaled, leaning my head against the cool steel wall. For a single, fleeting second I was alone. Then, just as the doors were starting to whisper shut, a hand slammed against the threshold. The doors instantly retracted with a polite, metallic sigh. He stepped in. Adrien Kael. CEO. I knew him instantly from the imposing photographs in the lobby and the terrified reverence in my orientation lecture. He was a force of nature, tall, impeccably tailored in a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than my entire tuition, with eyes the startling, unsettling color of a winter sky. His presence didn't just fill the elevator, it seemed to drain the very oxygen out of the small space. I froze, stammering out a quiet, "Gee, good morning, Mr. Kael." He didn't acknowledge the greeting. Instead, he reached past me, pressing the button for the 60th floor, his penthouse domain. The motion was deliberate, his arm brushing my shoulder, his proximity immediately intimate and alarming. It was a calculated intrusion into my personal space that made every nerve end fire in panic. The subtle scent of his expensive sandalwood cologne enveloped me, heavy and mesmerizing. He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping over me with an unnerving thoroughness that felt less like an inspection and more like a claim. I could feel the flush climbing from my neck to my hairline. I was trapped between him and the steel wall. "You'll get used to everyone staring at you, Voss," he finally said, his voice deep, smooth and laced with an unexpected layer of cold command. It wasn't a piece of advice, it was a statement of fact, delivered with the absolute certainty of a man who knew he could dictate the reality around him. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I hope not, sir. I'm just here to work." A shadow of something that might have been a smirk flickered across his perfect mouth. "Everyone is here to work, Elias. But some people attract a different kind of attention." He took a single, deliberate step closer. The kind that is difficult to ignore. The elevator stopped at the 18th floor. It felt like the entire ride had lasted hours. My escape was imminent, but I was rooted to the spot, pinned by his intense gaze. "Have a productive day, Mr. Voss," he said, the corner of his mouth ticking up just enough to be unsettling. "It's going to be a very interesting one." I stumbled out onto my floor, legs unsteady, the brief, intense encounter having completely derailed my carefully constructed composure. I didn't look back, but I felt the weight of his attention until the elevator doors closed. I didn't know it then, but the obsession had begun the moment he first saw me. It was an invisible chain, and he had just snapped the first link around my ankle. The rest of the day was a blur of nervous introductions, setting up my tiny cubicle, and the constant, nagging feeling of being watched. Later that afternoon, a sleek, expensive gift basket arrived on my desk, ostensibly from the CEO's office, to welcome the new interns. Mine was the only one delivered. Nestled amongst the gourmet coffee and imported chocolates was a personalized, handwritten note on heavy, embossed stationery. It read simply, "Welcome to Vernoss, Elias. I look forward to seeing more of you. AK." I gripped the note so tightly my knuckles turned white. It was both a lavish welcome and a deeply unsettling message. My deskmate, a handsome but strangely watchful young man named Liam, leaned over my shoulder, his gaze venomous. "Wow," he sneered, the jealousy thick in his voice. "The CEO doesn't even know my name. Guess some people just know how to climb fast." I shoved the note into my briefcase, feeling the cold knot of fear and confusion tighten in my gut. I tried to shake it off, to attribute it to corporate formality, but I couldn't ignore the possessive gleam in Adrien Kael's eyes in the elevator. Just as I was about to log off for the day, my phone buzzed with an internal email. It was from the HR director, Theo Mars. Subject: Important HR policy briefing ASAP. "Mr. Voss, due to a pressing compliance matter, please report to the 60th floor, Mr. Kael's private office, at 7 p.m. this evening. Attendance is mandatory. Do not be late." My blood ran cold. The 60th floor. A policy briefing that required a new intern to report to the CEO's private office after hours. This wasn't normal. This wasn't corporate. This was a direct summons. I looked down at the note in my briefcase. "I look forward to seeing more of you." He was claiming me. And I knew, with a certainty that made me physically tremble, that he would not take no for an answer. The sun had already set, casting long dark shadows across the empty office floor. I was alone, and I was walking straight into the heart of the storm. What terrifies me is not what he might ask, but what I might be powerless to refuse. Chapter 2: The CEO's First Claim. The ride to the 60th floor was an endless, gilded ascent into the jaws of the whale. The elevator was silent, cushioned, and too fast. I watched the numbers tick up, 45, 50, 55, and with each digit the breath felt harder to pull into my lungs. This wasn't a policy briefing. This was a personal audience, a private inspection, and the late hour only amplified the clandestine, terrifying nature of the summons. Stepping out onto the 60th floor was like crossing a threshold into another dimension. Everything was muted, expensive, and vast. The only light came from the city stretching out below, a shimmering, indifferent blanket of gold and silver. A single elegant receptionist gave me a practiced, emotionless smile and pointed down a long corridor of dark wood and glass. Adrien Kael's office wasn't an office, it was a glass cage suspended in the sky. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at his city. My back to him was a wall of glass and moonlight. He didn't turn when I entered. "Come in, Elias," he said, his voice carrying easily across the vast space. The use of my first name in this intimate after-hours setting was immediately possessive. I closed the heavy oak door behind me, the thud echoing in the silence. "Mr. Kael, I received an email about a mandatory policy briefing, sir." I tried to sound professional, but my voice was thin and reedy. He finally turned. He hadn't changed out of his suit, but his tie was slightly loosened, and the top button of his shirt undone. A small, carefully controlled glimpse of vulnerability that somehow made him even more dangerous. "The policy briefing, yes," he murmured, taking a slow, predatory step toward me. "It pertains to the handling of highly sensitive information and managing internal pressures." He stopped a foot away. I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. "You are, Elias, a beautiful distraction." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. They were brutal, honest, and completely outside the realm of professional conduct. My cheeks felt hot, and I looked down at my shoes, unable to hold the intensity of his stare. I apologize, sir. I'll make sure to keep a lower profile, I stammered. A long, slender finger hooked under my chin, forcing my gaze back up. His touch was cold, electric, and utterly non-negotiable. No. You won't. You can't. That is the first rule you must understand here, Elias. You are already noticed. Everyone sees you. Everyone wants a piece of you. He dropped his hand and I felt the sudden, crushing loss of his contact. He then took a step back and scanned my attire, my ill-fitting suit jacket, the cheap tie I'd bought yesterday. Your tie is crooked, he stated, not as a criticism, but as a problem he needed to correct. Before I could protest, before I could even flinch, he was behind me. The suddenness of his proximity was dizzying. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, the rise and fall of his chest just inches from my own back. He smelled of power and sandalwood. It was suffocating. His hands lifted, settling on my shoulders. Then, slowly, with an agonizing lack of hurry, his long fingers moved to the knot of my tie. He didn't just straighten it, he adjusted it. He tilted my head slightly with one hand, forcing my neck to be exposed, and used the other to loosen and then retighten the silk, his knuckles brushing the sensitive skin of my throat. It was a gesture of profound intimacy and total dominance. He was literally dressing me, a demonstration that every piece of me, even my clothing, was under his control. You need to look the part, Elias, he whispered, his breath warm against my earlobe. You are now an object of significant value in this corporation. You must be presented properly. I couldn't move. My muscles had locked. This wasn't a policy briefing, it was a branding session. He was stamping his ownership without having to say a single word. The silent tension was unbearable, a pressure cooker of fear and a horrifying, secret spark of excitement I couldn't admit to myself. He finally stepped away, leaving my tie perfectly centered, the collar perfectly crisp. The air instantly felt cold where his body had been. Now look out there, he commanded, gesturing to the city view. I turned and my eyes widened. The entire 63rd floor of the adjacent building, the headquarters of a rival investment firm, was almost entirely glass. And standing in the shadow of one of the support pillars, framed by the cold, expensive elegance of his own office, was Victor Dreven, the board member. Victor was older, handsome in a ruthless, polished way, and he held a crystal tumbler of something amber in his hand. He wasn't looking at the city. He was looking directly into Adrien's office. He was looking at me. And then Victor did something chillingly deliberate. He raised the tumbler in a slow, elegant toast, a clear acknowledgement of my presence in Adrien's office, and a sign of recognition, as if he knew exactly what was happening. Then he lifted a corner of his mouth into a deep, knowing smirk, the smirk of a predator watching two rivals circle a desirable prize. I instantly realized I wasn't just in Adrien's office, I was on display. I was a claimed piece of territory, and the corporate war was playing out with me as the central battlefield. The thrill of being desired mixed sickeningly with the terror of being owned by these powerful, merciless men. Adrien saw my reaction. He didn't even turn his head. He's watching, the CEO said flatly. Let him watch. He needs to know who gets to adjust your tie. The briefing ended abruptly with Adrien handing me a thick, leather-bound volume of obscure financial regulations and simply saying, "Read it. Be prepared." Dismissed. The dismissal felt like a physical shove. The next few days were a blur of work, tension, and the constant feeling of surveillance. On Wednesday, an internal instant message popped up on my screen. Kieran Locke, lead investor. Hey Elias. I'm impressed with the buzz around your work. I'd love to talk strategy over a quiet lunch tomorrow. The cafeteria here is grim. Say the Gilded Cage, 1 p.m.? My treat. Don't worry about Mr. Kael. He and I have a long-standing understanding. Kieran Locke. The charming wolf. The thought of escaping the office even for an hour felt like a desperate gasp of fresh air. He had a reputation for being dangerously charming, but right then I saw him as a potential ally, a softer touch. I messaged back a nervous, enthusiastic acceptance. Less than 10 minutes later, before I could even save the date in my calendar, I received an official email from the Human Resources Department. Sender, Theo Mars, HR Director. Subject, Urgent Schedule Conflict and Policy Violation Warning. Dear Mr. Voss, This is a mandatory notification regarding your planned engagement tomorrow. Due to a critical, unscheduled budget review meeting on the 18th floor at 1 p.m., your lunch appointment with Mr. Locke has been cancelled by executive directive. Please note, interns are strictly forbidden from accepting personal or financial gifts, including expensive lunches from executive-level staff. Any further attempts to circumvent this clear policy will result in formal disciplinary action, up to and including immediate termination. Consider this your first and final warning. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The cancellation was swift, quiet, and brutal, and it came through HR cloaked in official policy. Adrien Kael hadn't lifted a finger, hadn't sent an email, hadn't spoken a word. He had simply signed a directive, used his HR director as a puppet, and cut off Kieran's approach before it even began. His control was pervasive, anonymous, and terrifyingly efficient. I felt a cold shadow fall over my cubicle. I looked up. It was Theo Mars, the HR director, standing over me with a slick, almost concerned smile. He was pretty in a fragile, unsettling way, and his eyes missed nothing. "Mr. Voss," he purred, leaning down so only I could hear him. "I just wanted to make sure you saw my email. You understand the gravity of the situation, don't you?" "Yes, Mr. Mars. I apologize. I didn't realize the policy regarding lunch was so strict." Theo's smile didn't reach his eyes. "It's not about the policy, Elias. It's about discretion. You have caught the attention of very powerful men who play games you can't even comprehend." He paused, placing a perfectly manicured hand on the edge of my monitor. "Mr. Kael is dominant. He doesn't share. Mr. Adrien is destructive. He likes to break things. And Mr. Locke is the silver-tongued devil who will wrap you up in pretty lies until you forget which way is up." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, but the threat was unmistakable. "My job is to maintain order, Elias. And in this context, order means you need to be obedient. You need to follow my rules for conduct. One mistake, one step too far toward any of the others, and your career at Vernoss will be over before it begins. Do you understand? You must be quiet, dependent, and utterly compliant with my directions." I nodded dumbly, feeling a fresh wave of humiliation. He wasn't saving me, he was recruiting me into his own form of control. He wanted me terrified and under his thumb. He was using the threat of termination as his own form of claim. Theo smiled, a flash of genuine menace this time. "Good. Now get back to work." I watched him walk away feeling sick. Every direction I turned there was a trap. Adrien was watching. Victor was smirking. Kieran was charming. And Theo was threatening to cut off my life supply. That night I went home, but the 60th floor was in my mind. I dreamt in a confusing, erotic, and suffocating loop. I dreamt of Adrien's cold, firm hands adjusting my tie, the pressure on my throat both frightening and arousing. I saw his face, sharp and dominant, reflected in the glass, a king surveying his prize. I dreamt of Victor, his elegant fingers resting on my thigh as I sat in his lap, the air in the private lounge thick with aged whiskey and sensual danger. His voice was a low, velvet promise of things I shouldn't want. I dreamt of Kieran, his seductive voice whispering things about running away and safety, his charm masking a wolfish hunger that was somehow more frightening than Adrien's honesty. I dreamt of Theo, his face close to mine, his breath smelling faintly of peppermint and quiet threat, handing me a termination letter that felt like a whip. And in the background always was the sight of Liam, my desk mate, his eyes burning with jealousy, watching me fall into the abyss, his hands slowly reaching out to touch mine on the keyboard. I woke up with a gasp, my body trembling and slick with sweat. I was utterly disoriented. My reality was no longer my own. My mind was a battlefield, and the men of Vernoss Corporation had already taken up residence. I looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. I had 3 hours before I had to go back. I knew I should be terrified. I was terrified. But beneath the terror, a small dark seed of realization had begun to sprout. I was the center of their universe, and for the first time in my quiet, unremarkable life, I was intensely, desperately wanted. And that, more than anything, scared me because I had a horrible, growing suspicion that part of me was starting to like it. I just needed to figure out who I belonged to, before they broke me trying to find out. Chapter 3, The Seduction Games begin. The confusion from my nightmares didn't dissipate with the morning sun. It clung to me like a shroud. Walking back into the Vernoss Corporation building felt less like arriving at work and more like entering an arena. I wasn't just an intern anymore, I was a contested object, a walking declaration of war between titans. The psychological pressure was escalating rapidly. I tried to focus on my spreadsheet, but the air felt charged. Every glance, every passing shadow made me jump. It started innocently enough, right at my desk. "You look tired, Elias," Liam said, his voice unusually soft, leaning close enough that I caught the faint, sweet scent of his cologne. He was handsome, conventionally so, but his eyes held a calculating edge I hadn't noticed before. "Long night," I mumbled, trying to ignore the heat rising in my face. Liam didn't move back. He reached past my shoulder, supposedly to grab a stapler, and his fingers accidentally brushed the back of my hand resting near the mousepad. It was a fleeting, feather-light touch, but in the highly sensitive state I was in, it felt like an electric shock. "You need to relax," he whispered, letting his hand linger near mine for a heartbeat too long. "This environment can be brutal. You need someone in your corner, someone who understands the real dynamics here." He flashed a smile that was supposed to be charming, but it only looked hungry. "Maybe we could get coffee? Just to talk strategy?" Before I could process the offer, the subtle flirtation, or the implied threat to my focus, my internal communicator chimed with an urgent notification. "Mr. Voss, the CEO requires an immediate status update on the Q3 projection model in person. Bring your laptop to the 60th floor, now." The suddenness felt like a rescue and a recapture all at once. Liam recoiled, his face instantly hardening into a mask of bitter resentment. He knew exactly what that summons meant. He was cut off before he even made his move. I scrambled up, grabbing my laptop. As I headed for the elevator, I took a detour to the water cooler, trying to settle my nerves. That's when I heard the smooth, familiar voice. "Running away so soon, Elias?" It was Kieran Locke, the lead investor. He materialized from a side hallway, impossibly elegant in a dark suit, his silver charm turned up to its highest setting. He didn't move aggressively. He simply trapped me in the quiet alcove between the water fountain and a ficus tree with his sheer, overwhelming presence. "Mr. Locke, I have a meeting with the CEO," I stammered, clutching my laptop like a shield. Kieran leaned in, his voice a low melodic purr that vibrated near my ear. It was the sound of a predator offering a soft landing. Adrien. Always needing to command attention. "Don't worry, the tyrant can wait 5 minutes for his newest toy." My blood ran cold at the word toy. "You shouldn't be here, Elias," he continued, his eyes full of practiced sympathy. "You're too kind, too beautiful for this place. You're being used as a pawn in their petty corporate games. Adrien uses power, Victor uses wealth. Theo uses fear." His hand came up, gently, seductively, pushing a stray strand of hair off my forehead. "Let me take care of you. I can protect you from them. We can leave this snake pit. I can give you a contract, a life, where you don't have to look over your shoulder every minute. You just need to trust me. You belong with someone who will value you, not just claim you." The offer was intoxicating: escape, protection, freedom. But the look in his eyes betrayed the sincerity of his words. There was a desperate, controlling need beneath the charm. He wanted me emotionally attached so he could wield me against Adrien. I can't, Mr. Locke. I really have to go." I pushed past him, my heart hammering against my ribs. I raced toward the elevator, shaken by the intensity of Kieran's manipulation. I pressed the button for the 60th floor, desperate for the artificial safety of Adrien's controlled environment, even if it meant stepping back into his cage. But the elevator I needed was momentarily held. A few feet away at the high-speed executive bank, the door hissed open and out stepped Victor Dreven. He saw me immediately. His eyes, sharp and assessing, locked onto mine. He paused, radiating cold, expensive patience. Elias Voss. Just the person I was looking for. His voice was cultured, deep, and carried the effortless authority of old money. My feet were already pointed toward the other elevator, but Victor's gaze was a hook. "Mr. Dreven, I'm late for Mr. Kael." "Adrien is always late," Victor dismissed with an elegant wave of his hand. "Come. I need your perspective on a crucial merger document. It won't take long. My private lounge." He didn't wait for a refusal. He walked toward a heavy, unmarked door nearby. I felt compelled to follow. I was afraid of Adrien's fury if I was late, but the dread of crossing Victor Dreven felt far heavier. The lounge was small, hushed, and furnished like a European aristocrat's library. Victor went straight to a plush leather sofa, indicating a dark, shiny tablet resting on the coffee table. "The resolution is complex," he sighed, patting the space next to him. "Come, sit here. It's easier to see the details." The lighting was dim, the atmosphere oppressive. I hesitated, staying on the edge of the sofa. Victor raised an eyebrow, a slight, disapproving twist of his lips. "Don't be shy, Elias. You need to focus. The tablet is right here." I shifted forward, trying to read the microscopic text on the screen. The angle was impossible. Victor watched me struggle for a moment, then gave a soft, amused chuckle. "Honestly, Elias, you are too young and too beautiful to strain yourself." Before I could react, Victor reached out, taking my wrist gently but firmly, and pulled me across the gap. I ended up seated not beside him, but fully in his lap, the laptop precariously balanced on my knees. My back was pressed against his solid chest, his breath stirring my hair. "There," he murmured, his voice a vibration against my spine. "Now you can see." Scroll to section 4.1. I was frozen, burning with humiliation and panic. His hand rested lightly on my hip, a point of contact that felt entirely too intimate, too possessive, and entirely calculated. He was claiming me physically, publicly, if anyone walked in, and masking it with the pretense of private mentorship. "You have exquisite taste, Adrien," Victor muttered into my hair. The comment meant not for me, but for the CO he knew was tracking my every movement. I was shaking, trying desperately to focus on the numbers swimming before my eyes, but all I could feel was the weight of Victor's expensive suit, the warmth of his body, and the sickening realization that they all saw me as nothing more than a shared toy. Just as I managed to free myself, mumbling an excuse about the CEO's urgent timeline, I nearly collided with a passing figure in the hallway. Theo Mars. He didn't miss a thing. His eyes darted from my flushed face to the closed lounge door Victor had just emerged from. His smile vanished. He pulled me sharply aside into an empty stairwell landing. "You went to Victor? After my warning?" His voice was cold, razor-sharp, stripped of its earlier, false concern. "He summoned me. It was about a document, I swear." I pleaded, my voice cracking. "Lies. You think I don't know the games they play? You think I don't know what Victor does in that lounge?" Theo pressed a hand against the wall right beside my head, trapping me. The earlier threat returned, now backed by genuine, furious possessiveness. "You are pushing the limits, Elias. I told you to be compliant. You are jeopardizing your entire career because you are flirting with the very people who will devour you." He didn't sound concerned for my safety. He sounded like a man whose property was misbehaving. "I control the paperwork, Elias," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "I control the disciplinary actions. You will meet me tomorrow in my office for a mandatory review of your professional conduct. If you want to keep your job, you will follow the rules I set out. Do you understand? Do you agree to my conduct rules?" "Yes," I whispered, utterly defeated. "Yes, Mr. Mars." "Good boy," he said, his voice regaining its oily smoothness, the word boy dripping with condescension. As I finally fled to the 60th floor elevator, I felt completely violated. I had been touched, trapped, whispered to, and threatened by 4 different men in the span of one afternoon. What I didn't know was that every single encounter, every lingering touch, every soft whisper, had been streamed live onto the hidden surveillance wall in Adrien Kael's private office. The elevator doors opened onto the 60th floor. Adrien was waiting. He wasn't at his desk, he was standing by the control center of his office, which was currently displaying 4 high-resolution feeds. A shot of Kieran leaving the alcove, a shot of Victor's lounge door, a shot of Theo pinning me to the stairwell, and a shot of Liam glaring at my empty desk. Adrien looked up, his face a mask of cold, terrifying composure. He offered no greeting, no question about my lateness. He simply smiled, a chilling, proprietorial twist of his lips, the smile of a man who owns all the cards, and said, "They've all had their fun, Elias. Now it's my turn to teach them a lesson." Chapter 4, Corporate War for a Beautiful Boy. Adrien Kael's smile was the most terrifying thing I had ever witnessed. It wasn't warm or flirtatious. It was the cold, satisfied expression of a warlord who had just seen his enemies expose their weaknesses. He was looking at the monitor bank, the visual proof of the attempts on me, and seeing not a threat but an opportunity. "You're late, Elias," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion, but the underlying possessiveness was a palpable physical force. "Mr. Kael, I apologize." Mr. Dreven requested an urgent consultation, and then Mr. Mars stopped me. "I know," he interrupted, his eyes flicking to the feed of Theo's stern, judgmental face. I saw. The casual confirmation that he had watched my humiliation, the unwanted touching, the verbal threats, sent a fresh wave of shame through me. He hadn't intervened, he had observed. He let them claim their small touches and whispers only to use that data against them. "You should be more careful with your affiliations, Elias," Adrien continued, walking slowly toward his desk, his movements measured and dangerous. "This company is based on loyalty, but those men? They are vultures circling. They want to tear you down simply because I noticed you." He didn't mention Victor's intimate touch in the lounge or Kieran's seductive promise of escape, but the implication was clear. I know exactly what they did, and they will pay for touching what is mine. I stood trembling, unable to look away from the screens. "Sir, I didn't encourage anyone. I promise I just want to do my job." He stopped, turning to face me. "Then let me make your job easier." The next 24 hours were a masterclass in silent, ruthless corporate warfare, conducted entirely by Adrien Kael, with me as the bewildered catalyst. First, Liam. My desk mate, the jealous pretty boy, was working on a crucial quarterly forecast report, the very thing he was hoping would earn him the attention I was receiving. As I walked past his cubicle, I heard him shout, a sound of pure, desperate agony. "It's gone. The whole server log is corrupted. 3 days of work, gone." I stopped, horrified. Liam was frantically clicking, tears of frustration in his eyes. He looked up at me, his eyes instantly accusing. "Did you touch my files? Did you do something?" I shook my head, backing away. "I was on the 60th floor all afternoon, Liam. I barely even saw you." But Liam didn't believe me. He looked at me with pure venom, convinced I had somehow sabotaged him. What he didn't know was that a quiet, untraceable command had been issued from the 60th floor. A single surgical strike into the shared server to delete only the files owned by Liam Hart. The jealousy was instantly weaponized. Adrien removed the threat by eliminating the competition's work, making me appear either lucky or dangerously powerful. Next, Victor. The older board member had invited me via email to a high-profile industry gala the following night, an event notorious for its secrecy and exclusivity. The invitation was explicit, a chance to discuss your future privately. I didn't even get a chance to craft a refusal. An hour after the invite landed in my inbox, the company's automated security system flagged it as phishing/suspicious external link. The invitation was auto-deleted, and Victor's private calendar entry for the event was mysteriously erased. When Victor tried to call me directly, his internal calls were automatically rerouted to a disconnected internal line, all traceable back to a minor system-wide software patch, initiated and approved by the CEO's administrative access. Victor would arrive at the venue tomorrow night, only to find I was never invited, and he had been systematically shut out. Then came Kieran. The charming investor needed high-level access to the next quarter's preliminary reports to finalize a major deal. His clearance level had been executive elite for years. But late that afternoon, every attempt he made to access the secure documents was met with a blunt, "Access denied. Clearance level insufficient." Kieran's security level had been silently and surgically dropped to senior manager, just enough to function, but nowhere near enough to finalize the deal or exert the pressure he wanted. He was crippled financially, and Adrien didn't need to fire him. He simply rendered him impotent. Finally, Theo. The HR director, the puppet master, received a formal notification from the accounting department. A full, comprehensive internal audit of HR's operational budget and staffing expenses, requested by the CEO's office, starting immediately. Audits are terrifying in corporate life. They freeze all activity and expose all secrets. Theo's power, the control he wielded through firing and hiring, was instantly neutered. He was too busy scrambling to hide his department's minor and major improprieties to bother with threatening a single intern. The dizzying speed of it all, the crashes, the deletions, the demotions, the audits, made my head spin. Adrien wasn't just protective. He was a corporate god, manipulating the strings of the entire organization just to clear a path to me. I was witnessing a systematic purge, all because a few men dared to touch his perceived property. I felt a terrifying, dizzying mixture of fear and absolute, paralyzing thrill. I had never been the center of this much desire, this much ruthless, focused energy. It was toxic, but it was also the most powerful, exhilarating feeling of my life. Adrien called me back to his office that evening, exactly at 7 p.m. The office was dimly lit, the surveillance screens now off. It was just the two of us and the vast, glittering city. He leaned against his desk, crossing his arms, looking like a man who had just won a war without firing a visible shot. "The waters are calm now, Elias," he said, his voice soft, almost caressing. "The distractions have been handled." I could only nod, breathless. "Mr. Kael, I don't know what to say." It felt like the whole company shifted today. "The company shifts for me," he corrected, his eyes dark and intense. "And if you are part of my focus, then the company will shift for you too." He took a step toward me, closing the remaining distance slowly, inexorably. "They think they can play games," he murmured. "They think they can use their charm or their threats or their money to lay a claim on you. They are wrong." He reached out, his long fingers trailing down the side of my face, his thumb lightly stroking the skin near my mouth. It was the first truly tender touch, yet it was layered with the terrifying weight of his dominance. "You are not a prize to be won by committee, Elias. You are mine to claim." He didn't ask. He declared. He lifted his hand, moving toward the internal phone line. "I need you to come to my office after hours tomorrow," he commanded, his voice suddenly thick, rougher than before. "Alone. We have a private matter that needs addressing." He put the phone down, his eyes never leaving mine. The air was thick, charged with unspoken, burning tension. He wasn't talking about spreadsheets or audits. He was talking about the physical claim, the inevitable conclusion of this ruthless corporate war. "I won't accept any excuses," he warned, his voice low and guttural. "No other summons, no urgent documents, no HR warnings. You come here. To me. Alone." I could feel my entire body vibrating with fear and a deep, shaming anticipation. This was it. The moment of no return. I was being invited into the inner sanctum of his obsession. I managed a single, choked word. "Yes, sir." Adrien finally allowed himself a satisfied, hungry look that went straight to my core. "Good. Go home, Elias. Dream of me." I practically ran out of the office, the urgency of his claim echoing in my mind. I was claimed, protected, and terrified. I was walking willingly toward the man who had just destabilized the entire corporation just to get me alone. The question wasn't if I would go, but what he would take from me when I did. Blackheart Chapter 5. The CEO's Obsession Turns Physical. I spent the entire next day counting the minutes. My focus was zero. My hands trembled over my keyboard. The office felt eerily quiet. The corporate war had been fought and won, and the silence was unnerving. Liam avoided my gaze, nursing his ruined project. Victor and Kieran were conspicuously absent, dealing with their sabotaged appointments and access issues. Theo passed me once, his eyes tight with stressed fury, but he couldn't afford to waste time on me now that his department was under audit. I felt like the single point of stillness in a powerful storm. When the clock finally crawled to 6:55 p.m., I packed my empty briefcase, my movements stiff and automatic. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I simply walked to the elevator, feeling the relentless, magnetic pull toward the 60th floor. The penthouse office was darker tonight, the only illumination coming from the breathtaking view. Adrien was waiting, leaning back against his massive mahogany desk, his posture relaxed, yet radiating coiled tension. He wasn't wearing his jacket. His sleeves were rolled precisely to the mid-forearm, revealing the powerful definition of his wrists and forearms. He watched me walk in, his eyes burning with an unnerving intensity that made my breath catch. "You came," he stated, not as a question, but as a confirmation of his absolute control. "You summoned me, Mr. Kael," I whispered, closing the door behind me. The lock clicked into place with a quiet, definitive sound. He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips that held no warmth, only hungry triumph. "Tonight, you may call me Adrien." The intimacy of the address in this confined space made the air thick and combustible. My legs felt shaky. "Adrien," I repeated, the name tasting foreign and dangerous on my tongue. He He pushed off the desk, taking 2 measured steps until he stood directly in front of me. I was forced to look up, trapped in his orbit. Good. Now tell me about yesterday. Sir, Don't lie, Elias, he cut in, his voice dropping to a gravelly, possessive growl that sent a shiver down my spine. You think I don't know who put their hands on you? I watched every frame. I want to hear it from you. Tell me who touched you today. His demand was utterly perverse, a twisted need for confession that solidified his claim over my body and my truth. It wasn't about apology, it was about submission. I tried to deny it, to pretend the incidents were purely professional. No one touched me, Adrien. It was just professional conduct, sir. Mr. Driven needed help with the tablet. His composure snapped. The speed with which he moved was shocking. He reached out, seizing my wrist in a grip that was firm but not painful, simply inescapable. He yanked me forward, spinning me with a single controlled motion until my back hit the cold glass wall with a soft thud. My laptop bag dropped forgotten to the thick carpet. I was pinned, the vast, dazzling city lights blurring behind my head. Adrien leaned in, his face inches from mine, his scent, sandalwood and dominance, filling my senses. He still held my wrist, his thumb tracing the blue vein pulsing near my pulse point, a subtle, constant reminder of his strength. Don't lie to me, Elias, he repeated, the words low and vibrating with barely restrained fury. I saw Victor pull you into his lap. I saw Kieran touching your hair. I saw Theo pressing you into that wall. I know what they did and what they wanted. You are mine, and I will not tolerate other men laying hands on what belongs to me. His jealousy was a tangible, frightening thing. It wasn't the jealousy of a lover but the possessiveness of an owner. I will remove them, he promised, his voice low, guttural, a vow of destruction. Tell me who touched you today. I'll make sure they never come near you again. The raw, focused intensity of his desire was overwhelming. The fear was acute, yet beneath it, the dark, shameful spark of excitement flared into a blinding heat. This man, this terrifyingly powerful man, was willing to destroy his company's hierarchy just because another man dared to graze my skin. Victor. Victor held me. I choked out, the confession tearing from me. The moment I said it, a shudder ran through Adrien's frame. He didn't hurt me physically, but he leaned in closer, trapping me in the vice of his body. His forehead rested against mine, his breath mingling with mine. The air was charged, the tension almost unbearable. Good boy, he whispered, the praise a devastating mixture of relief and predatory satisfaction. You obey me. That is all that matters. He lifted his free hand, and instead of taking my chin like before, he traced the curve of my mouth with the tip of his thumb, gently but firmly. His eyes, the startling shade of winter sky, locked onto mine, questioning, demanding, promising. The first erotic tension exploded between us. It wasn't a kiss or even a touch that was overtly sexual, but the silent, burning realization that we were standing at the precipice. He wanted me to desire him back, to give him permission to cross the boundary he had just fiercely established. My breath hitched. My mouth felt dry. I wanted to deny the electricity coursing between us, but the lie was impossible. My body was singing with a terrifying responsive yearning. He saw it. He saw the flicker of vulnerability, the spark of shared desire in my eyes. His lips parted slightly and he leaned in, his intention crystal clear. Adrien. If you're done devouring the boy, I need him. The voice, elegant and infuriatingly composed, cut through the charged silence like a whip. Adrien froze. His body tensed, going from predator to stone in an instant. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. The only person with the nerve, the arrogance, and the executive clearance to walk into his 60th floor office unannounced was Victor Driven. Victor stood framed in the doorway, impeccably dressed, a faint, mocking smirk on his lips. He looked completely unconcerned about the chaos Adrien had wrought yesterday. He saw my flushed face, the way Adrien still held my wrist, the intimate distance between us, and his eyes glinted with victorious malice. You forget, Adrien, Victor said, sauntering in, holding a slim folder. The merger resolution still requires Elias's signature as a witness for the accounting team, per the new policy update. He's required downstairs immediately. You can't hoard him all night, darling. We all have stakes in the intern now. Adrien nearly snapped. The cold mask of control slipped, revealing a flash of absolute, incandescent rage. His jaw locked, and his grip on my wrist tightened painfully for a second before he instantly released me, stepping back to regain his composure. He wasn't furious about the policy update. He was furious that Victor had dared to interrupt his moment of claim, to publicly remind him that I was still a contested prize, not a secured possession. "He's not leaving," Adrien stated, his voice dangerously low. "The document can wait until morning." Victor chuckled, a dry, sophisticated sound. "No, it can't. And if Elias doesn't sign it now, you will be accountable for the delay. Come along, Elias. Unless, of course, the CEO is holding you against your will." He was giving me an out, but it was a trap. If I stayed, I was submitting entirely to Adrien's rage and obsession. If I left, I was openly defying Adrien and choosing Victor's dangerous territory. I looked at Adrien's face, the barely contained violence, the possessive fury. My choice was terrifyingly simple: choose one master or the other. I quickly bent down, grabbing my briefcase, avoiding Adrien's eyes. My heart was thundering. I need to go, Adrien," I stammered, my voice trembling. "It's a mandatory document." I slipped past Adrien and walked quickly toward the door, my entire being screaming from the internal pressure. Victor let me pass, then turned to Adrien, his victorious smirk widening. "Better luck next time, Adrien," he drawled before following me out, closing the heavy oak door behind him. I didn't dare look back. I knew Adrien was standing there, watching me leave, his cold jealousy turning into a burning vow of reprisal. I was free from his touch for now, but I was running straight into another man's dangerous claim. And the moment I stepped onto that elevator, I knew I had signed my own death warrant in the corporate war. Chapter 6. Elias begins to break. The walk back down to the lower floors with Victor was a study in psychological torture. Victor didn't touch me again, but he kept his pace deliberately slow, his presence a suffocating reminder of his power and his victory over Adrien. He was basking in the disruption he had caused. "Adrien is volatile," Victor said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "He believes control is ownership. It's dreadfully dull. Unlike him, I appreciate the struggle, Elias. I enjoy making beautiful things fight for their safety." I kept my eyes fixed on the elevator numbers, willing them to speed up. "Mr. Dreven, I just want to focus on my internship duties." "Do you?" Victor's laugh was soft, cruel. "Then why did you tremble when Adrien touched you? Why did you look at him with such intense, desperate devotion? You are a flame, Elias, and we are all moths. But the most terrifying thing is, you are starting to enjoy the light." He had seen through my panic to the small, dark kernel of excitement. His observation felt like another violation, leaving me raw and exposed. Once the document was signed, a mundane accounting detail disguised as an urgent matter, I fled the office. I couldn't go home. The terror and the thrilling anticipation had frayed my nerves to breaking point. I was overwhelmed by the attention, the constant fear of manipulation, the feeling of being hunted. Everyone is fighting for him, touching him, flirting, threatening, manipulating. I drove erratically, finally parking near a quiet city park. I sat there for an hour, shaking. I had to get out. My internship, my future, my sanity, it was all dissolving into an erotic, toxic power struggle I couldn't win. They didn't want my work. They wanted my compliance, my body, and my fear. I pulled out my phone and drafted an email to Theo Mars, the only man who could officially process my departure. Subject: immediate resignation. Dear Mr. Mars, please accept this email as my formal and immediate resignation from the Vernoss Corporation internship program. I regret that I cannot complete the program, but due to unforeseen personal circumstances, I must withdraw immediately. Elias Voss. I pressed send, leaning back against the headrest, a huge, shaky breath finally leaving my body. It was over. I was free. I would figure out my grades and my college credits later. Anything was better than being Adrien Kael's property. I waited 5 minutes for the automated acknowledgement, then 10. Nothing. I checked my sent folder. The email was there. I called Theo's internal extension. It rang out, then went to a full mailbox. I tried his private mobile number, which he had so menacingly given me during our conduct briefing. It went straight to voicemail. Frustrated, I drove back to the Vernoss building just to hand-deliver a hard copy to HR reception. The building was almost empty, the lobby guard giving me a weary nod. I found the HR floor dark. The only person still there was Theo, seated at his desk, sorting through mountainous piles of documents, the result of Adrien's budget audit. "Mr. Mars," I said, walking toward him, relief washing over me, "I need to hand in this resignation letter. Immediately." Theo looked up, his face pale and drawn from stress, but his eyes were instantly sharp, focusing solely on the letter in my hand. He didn't smile, he didn't threaten. He just looked calculating. "Resignation?" he repeated, leaning back. "That's an executive-level document, Elias. It must be processed and signed by 3 department heads before it's valid. You can't just quit a program of this prestige." "But I sent you an email." "It's immediate," I insisted, trying to slide the printed letter across his desk. Theo put his hand over it, flat and firm. "I haven't received anything, Elias. In fact," he plucked the paper from my grasp with a casual flick of his wrist, "we seem to be having a slight paper filing issue thanks to this blasted audit. I seem to have lost your paperwork." He crumpled the crisp white paper into a tight ball without even glancing at the contents. "You don't leave me," he hissed, echoing the terrifying command Adrien had once given me, but stripping it of any perverse desire and leaving only cold, bureaucratic malice. "You are under contract, Elias. If you fail to appear for work or violate your professional conduct, then I can legally terminate you. Until then, you are Vernoss property. And right now, I need to keep the CEO happy by ensuring his favorite intern is present and accounted for." I stared at the crumpled ball of paper, my last lifeline. He wasn't going to let me go. He was using his HR power to keep me trapped, a tool to keep the other powerful men distracted from his audit trouble. I turned and walked away, utterly defeated. I was trapped. I reached the elevator bank and pressed the lobby button. I just wanted to escape the building, the air, the entire city. The elevator door opened. I stepped in, pressing the button again. A large, cold hand suddenly clamped onto my shoulder, stopping the door from closing. Adrien Kael. He had followed me down. He was wearing an overcoat now, but his eyes were just as intensely focused as they had been on the 60th floor. "Going somewhere, Elias?" he asked, his voice low, deceptively casual. "Home, sir. I'm done for the night." He didn't remove his hand. It felt heavy, a mark of ownership. "You tried to resign." I froze. How could he know? Theo had just crumpled the paper. "I overheard a conversation on the HR floor," Adrien explained, seeing the horror in my eyes. "Theo is incompetent, but he is correct. You are under contract. And as the head of this corporation, I decide the terms of that contract." He leaned closer, his mouth next to my ear. "You don't leave me," he breathed, the words heavy and final. "You don't get to run away just because the game is getting interesting." The elevator dinged softly, the doors opening again onto the lobby. My chance for escape was right there. I took a deep breath and tried to break free of his grip, to step out. But then a silver-gray luxury sedan pulled up directly outside the lobby doors, right in the reserved CEO's spot. The driver's side window slid down. It was Kieran Locke, leaning across the passenger seat, his charming wolfish smile glittering under the lobby lights. "Elias." "Perfect timing," Kieran called out, his voice carrying clearly. "I knew you wouldn't stay with that tyrant. Get in. We're getting out of here. I've arranged a flight. We can be out of the country by dawn, and neither Adrien nor Victor can touch us." He threw open the passenger door, offering me the ultimate escape, a grand, dramatic rescue. I looked at the open car door, at Kieran's outstretched hand, the symbol of freedom, warmth, and the promise of a life far away from this toxic office. Then I looked at Adrien. His eyes were blazing with a cold, desperate fury. His hand, still clamped on my shoulder, tightened into a crushing grip. He saw his property being stolen, openly and dramatically. Before I could even articulate a thought, Adrien moved. He didn't shout. He simply yanked me back by the wrist, pulling me hard and fast out of the elevator and back into the shadow of the lobby wall. "You dare," Adrien snarled, his voice a low, terrifying rasp directed at Kieran. Kieran's smile didn't falter. "He's making his own choice, Adrien. Stop behaving like a caveman." But my choice was already made for me. Adrien's grip was iron, his intention absolute. The violence of his possessiveness, the sheer refusal to let me go, was overwhelming. I was held fast between the open, beckoning car and the furious, dominant man. I was trembling, from fear of Adrien, from fear of Kieran's manipulative charm, and from the deep, paralyzing sense that I had no control left over my own life. Adrien pulled me completely into his space, turning his back on Kieran, shielding me as if I were a physical shield. "Go home, Locke," Adrien commanded. "He is not yours." Kieran just laughed, a cruel silvery sound. "We'll see about that, Adrien. The night is young." He sped away, leaving me alone with the man who had just violently asserted his claim in the most public way possible. Adrien turned to me, his chest heaving, his possessiveness fully exposed. He took my face in his hands, his thumbs running along my jawline. "You belong to me, Elias. Say it. Say you are mine." I couldn't speak, trapped between the terror and the devastating, addictive thrill of being wanted this violently. But the night was far from over. The war was about to escalate into an open declaration of corporate ownership, and I was about to be officially displayed as the spoils.
Thank you so much for sticking with Elias through the emotional turmoil, the terrifying possessiveness, and that utterly chaotic ending. This story, The Intern Everyone Wants, was a huge experiment for me. I've always been drawn to high-intensity dark romance, but diving into a full-on toxic BL harem scenario, where every single man is a terrifying, controlling force, was a new challenge. I hope the psychological hooks, the drama, and the relentless pacing kept you glued to the screen, or the page. I tried to incorporate the psychological triggers that make stories intensely engaging, focusing on the fear of ownership versus the thrill of being intensely desired. Now, I absolutely need to know your thoughts. Who is the most dangerous contender for Elias? Is it the chilling, possessive CEO, Adrien? The manipulative charmer, Kieran? Or the elegant destroyer, Victor? And more importantly, what did you think of the harem dynamic? Does it work? Do you want to see Elias fight back, or completely surrender to the most powerful man? Drop a comment below, and let me know your theories for Chapter 7. I read every single one. Don't forget to like this story if you love the drama, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the ultimate, inevitable collision in the next chapter. See you soon for the next installment.